Yeah.
All right. You're covered. Thank you. Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to session 5, Theoretical and Conceptual Approaches. This is our first presentation titled Advancing Communication Skills in Undergraduate and Intervention Program. Welcome to Dr. Sabine Smith from Kennesaw State University. Okay, good. Thank you for letting me be here.
I think these might.
Right?
Online.
Can you hear me in the background?
No, it's online people don't hear you.
Not very well.
And we'll add a challenge to my navigating my papers and everything else. But welcome to the session. I am speaking here, trying to flip back on this topic of introducing a study that I have done with colleagues at a regional institution on the outskirts of Atlanta in Georgia, similar to the University of Arizona, 45,000 students. But this was an interdisciplinary initiative that brought together faculty from various backgrounds to do this pilot study as part of a research initiation. And I am reporting based on publications that have come from that. The pilot study goes back to 2021. The presentation outlines the rationale, the methodology, and initial findings, as well as future directions for this intervention program that is aimed at improving communication skills among undergraduates, but was specifically piloted in an industrial systems engineering class. Drawing from co-authored reports in 22 and 23 and grant proposals that we had submitted since 2020, we highlight the importance of this research in addressing the skills gaps observed in undergraduates, especially with regards to the inability to communicate effectively and appropriately in diverse teams. And I want to make a plug for our presenters in the adjacent earlier session because they just had a really interesting study developed on this one as well. So the scholarship and accreditation standards have been reporting for decades already. They have verified that employers prioritize graduates with strong communication skills. However, many universities, particularly in the STEM fields, still emphasize the technical proficiency over these critical social, including communication skills. This discrepancy hampers graduate success in diverse workplace environments. And while some institutions invest significantly in communication programs, for many institutions, there are curricular and budgetary constraints that often limit effective implementation. And ad hoc initiatives often fall short, lacking both rigor and relevance, long-term effects, and sometimes even backfire. And we've heard about this in various contexts already. So our faculty team embarked on this study in 2019 to address specific communication challenges faced by engineering students within the curriculum. Motivated by institutional changes, our institution had just ascended to R2 Carnegie status, and our university-wide push was that faculty engage in interdisciplinary research and secure federal funding. We were also having personal interest invested into intercultural communication and sought cost-effective and sustainable solutions through interdisciplinary collaboration. As you can probably see from the names already, our team comprises of 4 faculty members from 4 continents and 4 different language backgrounds with expertise in engineering, psychology, and intercultural studies. Each member brought unique perspectives and experiences to the projects, enhancing the interdisciplinary approach, but also as we pursued the study collaboratively, we were really prompted to give each team member space and grace to be heard and seen, and experienced firsthand what our students are oftentimes coming up against when they are placed in interdisciplinary or diverse teams in paraprofessional contexts, and the struggles that go along with that, but also the very rewarding experience. So our faculty team composition was an excellent foundation for what we then embarked on. So initiated in 2020, our pilot study investigated the effectiveness of an intervention protocol, especially 3 distinct initiatives and correlational assessment measures in improving communication skills among engineering students. And we wanted to answer, based on the research that I had done previously, that our colleagues had observed, these items to the research questions, namely drawing on, and I will go into some of our lit review, the first question, are students even aware of the importance of communication skills? What is their attitude to communication skills practice as something that you're not born with, but that you need to practice in order to be getting better at? And then how do we do this in diverse teams? What is the experience about this? And what are the learning outcomes that are also evidenced in direct evidence, namely their project grades for the team assigned project? So in our pilot study, and I'm sorry that it's a little bit cut off there, we developed a semester-long intervention program that began in the second week with an assessment of pre-intervention attitude test toward teamwork. We followed up with an activity that I will go into more into depth, the story circles activity that had been published as an open educational resource. We assigned the project, and in a new intervention initiative, we chunked the project into 3 deliverables that required the students to meet in groups and discuss and record their discussions. And we included, based on the research, a preamble that they took turns reading at the onset of each recorded meeting in order to intentionally focus on specified communication skills that we then, in feedback loops, 3 times would reiterate and give them formative feedback based on the preamble, based on the story circles activity, to guide them and give them feedback to improve and practice their communication expertise. The project culminated into a presentation. The instructor gave, based on paper and presentation, individual team grades. We compared to those to a prior semester in which they hadn't had an intervention program. And we also looked at focus groups and then end semester evaluations from the students. And we reported on the findings based on these 3 intervention protocols and correlational 6 assessments that we adapted or designed ourselves and then mined for the data, qualitative and quantitative. A main component was the UNESCO Story Circles methodology. Is anybody familiar with this? This is the backdrop to our study, but based on decades of research into intercultural scholarship going back to the 50s, and predominantly focused on the work of Darla Deerdorf, who published this UNESCO Story Circles manual as an open educational resource. Recall that we want to have something that is sustainable, accessible, user-friendly. This gives an introduction to a way of bringing people together, has been taught and piloted in 5 continents all around the world in different contexts, including university settings, and found to be appropriate for all kinds of audiences, regardless of their level of intercultural competence. Because as we also know from the literature, oftentimes we need to have interventions that target students where they are at, and not a lot of interventions will accommodate different levels of intercultural competence already. So we settled on this UNESCO Story Circle also because I had positive experiences in different contexts and piloted engineering and got positive reviews from those students. The second main pillar was our research into teamwork. And we found that teamwork is variously reviewed in the scholarship and has been for a long time as being verified as being important for engineers because their work takes place in negotiating decisions, in finding solutions, oftentimes in geographically dispersed teams, but also that students need guidance because they approach teamwork with various apprehension levels or commitment levels. And so they need to be guided into having the right attitude from the get-go. However, faculty also needs to be supported in these initiatives because many faculty members lack the prior preparation for both facilitating intercultural communication or teamwork themselves. So these smart partnerships have been also verified in the scholarship. Again, to our intervention protocols. The story circles is a readily available, easily administratable, and adaptable methodology that we tweaked for the purpose of our engineering students to give them the sense that this is relevant and appropriate for their context, namely identifying engineers who succeed in diverse teams or challenges that they encountered in the engineering work when they were put together with other team members. The team assignments were also done in such a way based on the scholarship that the instructor tried to intentionally place students in 4 to 5 member teams, including minority students, women, people of color, to account for the diversity that our university has. Unlike in the previous installment of this project, the instructor decided to chunk the assignment, having 3 rounds, not only of deliverables, but also of team meetings that the students embarked on and that were introduced by the reading of a preamble that focused on leadership skills that were focused on communication, such as think about a problem and at least 2 ways of solving it. Note your tone and body language when you are engaging with your peers. Try to think of a solution that you are not comfortable or familiar with. And for every one of these team meetings, they received formative content review, but also formative critical skills review. Let me just go back to my next slide. The study participants included 31 students, as you can see here. We also had the fortune in 21 that we were still in the pandemic and were able to administer this in both virtual and face-to-face contexts, which in some ways also influenced our study and the findings. There is in industrial and systems engineering also a significant component of female students, which is probably not replicated in some of the other engineering disciplines in our field. I'm skipping forward with an eye on the time as well to the findings that we had based on our assessments. We did develop a story circles survey based on the activity that based on the research that we had done. There's also a survey included in Darla Diodor's manual. We also adapted it from the literature that we reviewed for teamwork and included 27 items. We ran the क्रॉन-Bus alpha and found it reliable. And we found that in response to the story circles, there was an overwhelming acceptance by these engineering students for the activity that surely took them out of their comfort zone because it is a guided communication exercise that is certainly not something that they would choose or find normal to do. But when asked whether this activity was helpful or not helpful, the overwhelming amount, almost 83%, found that it was helpful in getting to know their teammates, in establishing some ground rules for communication. Here, the specified goal was to listen for understanding and not for action or for opinionating or for judgment. But it was also helpful in relating some of the challenges and opportunities in connection with teamwork. The overall perceptions by the students cut across gender and instruction modality as approving of this activity. And in another prompt, they were asked what they liked best about it and what they liked least about it. 100% of the participants had comments of what they liked best. Not even 2/3 had something to identify what they liked least. But they did appreciate the general teammate relationship, the group work basis, the learning about backgrounds and diversity that is part of the prompting in the story circles. And when they referred to what they liked least, it was the guidedness, the structuredness, the time constraints that is part of this specific methodology that also, however, ensures that they're moving through the communication pretty quickly. Whoops. Let me back up to this one. This is something that we identified in the survey with the help of our psychological sciences colleague. These 4 themes that responded in the survey to attitudes, communication, cultural diversity, and teamwork, 4 components in the survey that were further analyzed. The open prompt to briefly describe in which this story activity was helpful or not helpful was included 3 months after the activity and demonstrates that the effects were lasting. Because after the initial pre-assessment attitude toward teamwork survey, the teamwork experience in the final post-intervention survey, we included these questions, and the appreciation for the initial communication exercise lingered and actually shows increased appreciation for it. The pre and post surveys that we included were also a survey instrument that we adapted and supplemented based on extant survey material. 24 items, we ran the Cronbach's alpha analysis and found it also reliable. We were particularly interested, again, in terms of were there differences in attitude among genders and modality delivery in the instruction. And we found that in both cases, instructional mode, but also in terms of gender, appreciation for teamwork increased in the course of the semester in this intervention group. In qualitative comments, students, almost 3/4 of them valued the team meetings that they were asked to participate in, which was a significant departure from previous experiences by the instructor. They described the team meetings, remember 3 rounds of them in the part of the project, as helpful, as ensuring the successful completion of the program, and as also helpful in solving some of the communication problems among the team members. Some of them described them as not helpful, and I will show you some of these too, but in the pre and post surveys for teamwork attitudes, we identified 7 different thematic strands, and in all of those, we showed significant appreciation for the work pre and post as well. A third pillar of our analysis was the student performance as direct evidence. The instructor had previously taught the same course with the same project in a previous semester. However, she had not chunked the project, she had not done the intervention protocol, and she had found that in her evaluation of our intervention program students, the performance was significantly better. You see the results here. There is an almost a 10% increase in the average score for the final project by the students. Everybody got an A, whereas in the previous round, there were some students who had also flunked this project component. We also looked at semester course evaluations from the students and compared again the earlier iteration with the present iteration and saw significant improvement here, particularly in some of the open-ended comments that the students made. The end semester course evaluations are standardized. They speak to the instructor and also to the course. Predominantly, we noted that in the open, unprompted responses the students volunteered in our intervention program semester, comments on how much they appreciate it. Everything, including the activities, the chunking, the time for the team meetings, even the preamble reading on leadership skills that they had to do at the beginning of every meeting. But also commenting on the increased effort by the instructor to moderate and guide the process of the team completion. In conclusion, we do think that we can say that our data sources have been giving us confidence that this intervention program works for engineering students and is also a template that can be moved to other engineering disciplines. We see the strong support, we see the improved learner attitude from beginning to end. We also see the improved experience during the process and the improved appreciation after the process is completed. The key components in this, I think, are clear now. We do advocate for the use of these UNESCO story circles as a readily accessible, free of charge, and also very easily adaptable methodology. We do feel that we need to advocate for the practice of skills rather than just the assumption that once they have had a workshop that they will know how to do this in the future. We do see that the attitudes towards teamwork as a very essential skill in engineering disciplines, but in other disciplines as well, is based on a positive experience in a trial that is guided. We see the evidence in the project grid and in the end-semester course evaluations. We also feel that it's notable that the faculty collaboration was part and parcel of this, because as I mentioned, coming from different disciplines, coming from different cultural backgrounds, this was also oftentimes an exercise in negotiation and compromise. Even writing up these reports for publication, we brought expertises together that made us understand not any one of us single-handedly could have done this project, but only as a team were we complementing each other to do so. And I think this is a very much under-evaluated and undervalued fact of successful collaborative faculty work. We did get some seed funding for the study that allowed us to do this. We did secure 2 publications. We also have applied for grants subsequently and are still currently waiting to hear on an NSF funding. But we also must say we want to continue this research in the future because we still have to mine some data and answer some of these questions, because there are some limitations in the small sample size, in the confounding factors, in the assessment measures that can be still tweaked and refined and simplified for sustainability. But there is also the fact that for future directions, we need institutional support, we need funding support, and neither one of this is really easy to come by these days. And with that, I will close out and thank you.